Discover 4 amazing snacks that transform your vision overnight, seniors. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Ruth's tired eyes flickered at the glowing screen, the words jumping out at her with an electrifying pull. Was it possible? Could something as simple as a snack alter the course of her life hidden behind blurred vision and aching solitude? For years, these 4 walls had echoed with silence, suffocating her spirit. Memories of her children's laughter were fading ghosts, scattered now across distant cities, while her modest apartment hollowed out into an abandoned gallery of heartache. She brushed a gray strand from her face, fingers trembling slightly. The images of family gatherings hovered just beyond her memory's reach, holidays filled with shared stories, animated conversations, fleeting moments she could no longer grasp. A deep yearning gnawed at her, one that suggested there was still time to reignite those connections, especially with Theo, her grandson, who saw the world through his camera lens. Curiosity plucked at her as she read the article. Skepticism warred with a flicker of hope. With each line, her racing mind conjured images of colorful fruits and vegetables she could picture bursting with light and flavor, and in that instant, an ember sparked deep within her. Was it foolish? Did it really matter if the world reopened its vibrant palette to her tired eyes? She shut her laptop, the lingering shadows of doubt settling back in like a familiar coat. Days passed, her resolve fluctuating. At the grocery store, she hesitated before the produce aisle, uncertain hands reaching for beets and carrots. If this works, she murmured under her breath, a wave of determination washing over her. The first bite of kale felt like reclaiming a piece of her youth. Each day, she awaited the changes to unveil themselves, and as the kale disappeared into her daily smoothie, she found herself catching glimpses of details she hadn't seen in years: a neighbor's vibrant garden, children playing down the street. Right when hope blossomed, her daughter called. "Mom, are you sure it's safe to experiment with your diet? You're not as young as you used to be." The skepticism dripped from her voice, a mixture of concern guarding deep-rooted control. Ruth's heart sank, a familiar ache settling in her chest. Why couldn't she simply chase her dreams without being scrutinized like a fragile relic? Her daughter's words cut deeper than she cared to admit, the tension cloning itself into an unbearable silence. Before she could respond, the conversation shifted, abruptly ending with the same old expectations. Loneliness enveloped her once more, a suffocating reminder of societal prejudice against aging. Just as she tentatively ventured into the light, cruel mockery emerged from a senior woman in the community, confronting Ruth's joy. "Really? You think those silly snacks will help?" Ruth's breath hitched. Her heart raced like a frightened bird, trapped, questioning every single choice she made to reclaim her voice. Could she withstand this isolation? The electric buzz building within her began to dim. If bitterness and fear intertwined, would she just retreat to the shadows and give up? As she prepared to step into the light of Theo's exhibition, the anticipation felt like a thick fog. Would the same vibrant colors she had tasted bloom within her as she gazed at his art? Or would fear leave her feeling invisible once more, the very doubts that had shadowed her for so long pushing her back into obscurity? The looming question hung in the air. Could she embrace her newfound vision and independence, or was she destined to be trapped within a narrative that others wrote for her? The day approached with both excitement and anxiety, leaving her on the edge of something profound, each decision holding the weight of her entire being. Ruth stood before the mirror, her hands resting gently on the bathroom sink as she studied her reflection. The familiar lines etched across her face seemed to tell a story of resistance and regret. Today, however, was different. Today, she felt a faint glimmer of possibility dancing at the edge of her awareness, compelling her to step beyond the confines of her doubts. She took a deep breath and examined her own eyes, searching for the courage that lay buried within. "Your vision, Ruth," she whispered to herself, "is worth fighting for." That simple thought, paired with the growing enthusiasm for her healthful, colorful snacks, had ignited something more than just a physical transformation. It was as if a new narrative was waiting to unfold, one where she played an active role rather than remaining a passive observer in her own life. As she prepared to leave for Theo's exhibition, an array of emotions surged within her. Excitement mingled with trepidation, provoking her to confront the invisible barriers built by years of self-doubt. She dressed carefully, slipping into her favorite teal blouse that mirrored the vitality she craved. This was her chance to reclaim not just her vision, but her voice in a world that had gradually begun to silence her. Walking down the hallway, she took notice of the bright murals the building's tenants had painted. They seemed alive, every brushstroke bursting with color. The vivid imagery fed into her resolve, a reminder that transformation was possible. She cradled her cell phone tightly, willing herself to text Theo. "Can't wait to see your work tonight. It's going to be beautiful." Simple words, but they held weight. A step toward re-establishing her connection with her grandson, the community center loomed ahead. As Ruth approached, memories of the fragmented discussions with her daughter weighed heavily on her heart. "You're too old for this," echoed in her mind, but she refused to let those words control her actions. Entering the exhibition, she felt an electric buzz of creativity. Artworks sprawled across the walls, each piece inviting her, beckoning her to step closer. A deep inhale filled her lungs with the scent of paint and passion, inspiring her to push through the apprehension. This artistic gathering was not just a showcase. It was a testament to the power of resilience, the same tenacity she had begun cultivating in her own life. Theo spotted her first, his face lighting up with warmth as he hurried over. "Grandma, you made it." His excitement flooded her with joy, reminding her that the connections she longed for were never truly gone. They merely needed an opportunity to blossom again. As they moved through the gallery, Theo's enthusiasm was palpable. "You should try painting with me," he suggested, a new proposal that took her by surprise. Yet, buried within her, closed doors cracked open in response, inviting fresh air into hidden thoughts. Could this be the moment where she discovered another passion? Painting, art, expression, these were realms untouched. After Theo left her momentarily to greet another guest, Ruth ventured toward a collection showcasing abstract works. The splashes of color mirrored her internal turbulence, a chaotic yet beautiful dance of emotions. Standing there, gazing at the swirls of paint, a revelation washed over her. She was no longer just Ruth, the aging relic. She was a vibrant soul capable of creation, a vivid participant in a world filled with possibility. Just then, a voice broke through her epiphany, a familiar tone cutting through her moment of clarity. The same senior woman smirked across the room, her expression drenched in skepticism, and before Ruth could brace herself, she spoke. "Look at you, lost in your fantasies. Think you can actually create art?" Ruth's heart pounded, the spark of anger and defiance igniting within. She stood firm, meeting the woman's gaze head-on. This confrontation was nothing less than a moment of truth, a pivotal instance where she recognized the precise nature of her own growth. "Why not?" Ruth replied, her voice steady. "I just might surprise us both." As the tension hung in the air, Ruth felt a surge of determination. This was her turning point, a commitment to not only embrace her vision, but to craft her own story moving forward. With a half-smile forming, she turned away from the doubter and back to the art that awaited her, a canvas of opportunities that now stretched before her. The exhibition blossomed not just with the creations present. It signified the blossoming courage to explore her own artistry. What awaited her now, within this newfound realm of expression? The journey had just begun, tethered to her commitment to embrace every vibrant color life had to offer. But the path was fraught with uncertainty. Would she dare to step further into creativity, or would the weight of expectation keep her afraid to smear her brush on the canvas of possibility? Ruth retreated into her thoughts as she meandered through the gallery, still pulsing with disbelief at her own defiance. The moment had felt monumental, an almost cosmic assertion of her willingness to reclaim agency after years of letting external voices dictate her worth. What if she could paint? What if she could create? The laughter and chatter around her faded, and she felt her focus sharpen, filtering out each imagined judgment behind the murmurs. She found herself once more in front of the abstract collection that had spoken to her so profoundly moments before. The colors seemed to swirl with new meanings, each stroke eliciting a surge of emotion from deep within her core. Could she channel the tempest inside into art? The thought was intoxicating, but the nagging doubt crept back, and what if her efforts were futile? What if the skepticism of others proved justified? Breathing deeply, she reminded herself of the excitement in Theo's eyes when he suggested painting together. There must be a kind of magic in shared creation that transcended age and insecurity. Her resolve solidified as she began to map out her next steps. Painting classes, she thought. Finding a local group or studio where she could dive into this world without judgment. She envisioned vibrant canvases exploding with color, reflecting her inner self, a self that was no longer overshadowed by doubt and age. The idea invigorated her spirit. It was like discovering a hidden door that had always been locked. Just as this newfound determination settled within her, the same woman appeared at the edge of her periphery. She approached with an expression that was equal parts smug and curious. "You really think you can do this?" The sentiment dripped with condescension, and for a moment, Ruth felt the wave of self-doubt threaten to rise again. But she stood steady, reminded that transformation was no one else's decision to dictate. "This is what I want to do," she stated, her heart pounding with conviction. "I'm tired of being hesitant. I'm ready to explore." The woman tilted her head, a flicker of begrudging respect momentarily breaking her smirk. "Well, if you decide to reach for that brush, I'd suggest you practice. No one gets it right on the first try." With that, she pivoted sharply and disappeared into the crowd. Ruth watched her go, the comment echoing in her mind, and with it came a fresh realization. It wasn't just the physical act of painting she craved. It was the act of confronting her limits, of finding exhilaration in failure and growth. She would embrace mistakes like they were brushstrokes on canvas, unafraid to leave marks that told her authentic story. As the evening wore on, Ruth could hardly contain the rush of ambition swirling within her. The tapestry of life was waiting to be woven, patterns of joy, pain, love, and creativity, all interlaced. She resolved to return home and research classes, imaging her first strokes as she practiced courage upon a canvas. Yet, as she turned to leave the gallery, a chilling thought sent a shiver down her spine. What if Theo was right, and painting was much more demanding than she anticipated? Would she ultimately disappoint him, revealing that her newfound inspiration was merely a fleeting delusion? The weight of expectation coiled tightly around her heart as she walked, moving between vibrant installations. She had dared to envision a future filled with creativity, but that very vision now stood on a precipice, a thin line between potential and vulnerability. The path ahead shimmered with promise, and uncertainty wrapped its tendrils tightly around her mind. What awaited her in that struggle? Would the painting truly liberate her, or would it expose her insecurities in unforgiving light? Ruth stepped outside into the cool night air, the sounds of the exhibition fading away, leaving only the unresolved questions echoing in her heart. Determined yet anxious, she clutched her purse, suddenly uncertain whether she was ready to take the plunge into the unknown. Would she summon the courage to pick up a brush and paint her truth, or would the familiar chains of her past hold her back once more? Ruth barely slept that night, her mind a relentless whirlpool of thoughts and images. Each imagined stroke of a brush ignited her excitement, yet the specter of self-doubt lingered, whispering that she was too late to embark on such a journey. Morning light sneaked through her curtains, illuminating the empty walls of her room, blank spaces just like the canvases she longed to fill. After a quick breakfast, she sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open to a search engine displaying a myriad of art classes. Her fingers hovered over the keys, hesitating at the threshold of exploration. What do I really want? She asked herself, a question that felt foreign outside the safer confines of her thoughts. Staring at the screen, she found herself bombarded with options: abstract painting, watercolors, figure drawing. The possibilities felt overwhelming and exhilarating at the same time. She frowned at the names of established artists in her area who would teach. Could she really learn from them? Did she belong in that world? After a long moment, Ruth closed her eyes and reviewed the emotions from the previous night. The warmth of camaraderie with Theo crossed her mind, the thrill of shared visions igniting her spirit. Recalling his understanding presence fortified her resolve. She clicked on a nearby studio that promised a welcoming environment for beginners, her heart racing with anticipation. The moment she filled out the registration form, she felt as if a tight band around her chest had slackened. Weeks could pass in mere moments, but the days that followed felt like a slow unraveling. Each evening, she stepped into her small living room and began to familiarize herself with essential supplies: brushes, a palette, and various paints. She found herself divesting the remnants of her hesitations, her excitement gradually eclipsing fear. However, that expectation bore the weight of its own challenge. On the day of her first class, she arrived earlier than necessary, her palms damp and fingers twitching. The studio echoed with the laughter of children and the chatter of classmates. A sense of belonging began to blossom inside her, but it was soon overshadowed by the familiar pang of self-doubt. What if I'm the worst one here? She thought, recalling the woman's words from the gallery. How can I stand before them and create? The instructor, a lively woman with a penchant for encouragement, quickly put Ruth's fears at ease. As they introduced themselves, Ruth spoke shyly, her voice nearly swallowed by the room, filled with more confident beginners. But the instructor leaned closer, an understanding in her eyes. We all start somewhere, she said. Art is about your journey, not just the outcome. With each brushstroke on the canvas that afternoon, Ruth discovered something vital: failure was just part of the process. She painted over her mistakes, each new hue swirling over the last, a dance of color that mirrored her emotions. It was empowering, liberating. Yet just as she felt the thrill of creation, the nagging question resurfaced. Was this a genuine passion, or simply a fleeting distraction from her reality? As classes continued, Ruth poured her heart into the work, threading new emotions into every piece. The first few weeks were peppered with mistakes that initially filled her with frustration. But the growth came after, as she embraced each stumble, learning to confront her limits, her vulnerability becoming her ally. Painful memories danced around the edges of her creations, transforming them into stories that echoed her truth. The exploration of art soon revealed hidden depths within her past, memories that surged forward like tide pools. She dug into the waters of her childhood, entailing visions she long thought buried: abandonment, resilience, love. Ruth sat in her studio one evening, staring at the canvas before her with raw determination. In this journey, she discovered not only the act of painting but a compelling truth. Art had the power to navigate the complexities of her internal landscape, opening pathways to healing. Yet, despite the breakthroughs, she felt a nagging question loom. Was this artistic expression simply a mirror to her past, or could it help illuminate her path forward? Ruth knew she had reached a critical juncture in her journey, a moment where she needed to confront the depths of her own story. The moment of truth was approaching, and she was ready to embrace it. What awaited her in this confrontation? As she warmed up to the canvas, the tension crackled in the air, leaving her wondering not just about her art, but about the truths she must now face to step fully into her new identity. With the brush poised in her hand, Ruth took a deep breath, feeling the weight of expectations settle over her shoulders like a layer of paint. She couldn't simply gloss over her own story. The vibrant colors she mixed on her palette seemed to beckon her toward a deeper understanding of herself, urging her to release the emotions that chained her to the past. As the first strokes of crimson swept across the canvas, a revelation gripped her. This act of creation was more than mere distraction. It was a vehicle for discovery. Each application of paint felt like peeling back layers of self-imposed limitations, peeling away the echoes of doubt she had carried for years. Memories cascaded through her mind, moments of joy, but also times brimming with sorrow. The tension between these extremes came alive on the canvas, entwining her identity with each movement. Hours slipped by as she immersed herself in the process, absorbing the laughter and energy of her fellow classmates amidst her solitude. Still, a persistent whisper lingered in the back of her mind. What does it all mean? Would this painting lead somewhere? Or would it simply be another unfinished attempt? One evening, after a particularly challenging class where she faced a wall of blank canvas not unlike the one in her own mind, Ruth stood in front of her latest piece, questioning its significance. It featured blurred faces, a reflection of the people who had shaped her yet remained indistinct, mere shadows in her life. The ambiguity unsettled her. Did she fully comprehend the connections between her past, her art, and who she wanted to become? Seeking clarity, she began journaling, pouring her thoughts onto paper in a spirit of unfiltered honesty. Writing became a companion to her painting, an exploration of the questions she danced around. What if painting and writing could offer her a path to reconciliation? Could they serve as a bridge between where she had been and where she hoped to go? The following classes bore new intensity. The instructor, noticing Ruth's struggles with identity and direction, invited her to explore a significant theme in her work, understanding the relationship between her art and her past. Create something that speaks to your journey directly, she urged. Expose the vulnerability, embrace the chaos. The words struck a chord that reverberated through Ruth's thoughts. That night, as she stared at her palette, a flicker of determination ignited. Ruth picked up her brush and began to paint her truth swirls of color mixed with fragments of written words. She dared to depict the raw feelings of once fleeting joy tinged with sorrow. The act of confronting her history wrestled with the reality of creating art. The canvas transcended mere visuals. It became an embodiment of her struggles. As she layered the colors, Ruth found a rhythm, a pulsating heartbeat in her creative expression. The hesitation that had once gripped her transformed into a bold exploration of self. And yet, with each stroke, a nagging voice returned. What if you falter under your own truths? What if this art reveals something too deep, too painful? With uncertainty rising and resolve mounting, she decided to take a leap. Her next class was not merely an opportunity for learning. It would serve as a public forum for her art. For the first time, she aimed to present her work to others, ready to see how this confrontation could play out in front of her peers, how her vulnerability might echo in the eyes of those who confronted their own stories. There, in that moment of decision, Ruth understood this wasn't just about painting anymore. It was about pioneering a new chapter in her life, one where she embraced both her scars and her strengths. As she prepared herself for the unveiling, her heart raced with fear and excitement. Could she step forward and claim her place? The moment was drawing near, and as she stared at her creation, a new realization coursed through her veins. What awaited her in that classroom was more than a showcase. It was a catharsis, a chance to forge a new identity. But the question loomed large. Would she find acceptance, not only from her peers, but from within herself? Ruth tightened the grip on her brush, knowing she would soon find out what lay ahead in this complex journey of self-discovery. The moment of truth was upon her, and she was ready to face it, eyes wide and heart open. Ruth stepped into the classroom, the air thick with anticipation and tension. The easels to her left were filled with brash experiments of color and form, while her eyes were drawn to her own canvas, a heart laid bare with vibrant depth and vulnerability. She had chosen to display her piece, not just as art, but as a reflection of her very essence. Taking a deep breath, she weighed the moment. The apprehension that knotted her stomach began to unravel, whispering excuses to retreat, to hide behind the safety of anonymity. Yet, as her gaze lingered on the strokes of crimson and blue, she recalled the journey that brought her here, the nights of self-exploration, the sleepless thoughts captured in ink, and the resolve to confront her past. She was no longer just Ruth the painter. She was Ruth the discoverer, and this was her unveiling that as her classmates filed into the room. She could sense subtle glances, curiosity, skepticism, perhaps awareness of her internal tumult. The instructor gestured for silence, guiding everyone's attention to the collection of art displayed around the room. Ruth felt the space shift, the atmosphere thickening with unspoken words. She realized, at that moment, her peers would not simply experience her creation, they would experience her truths as well. She turned her back to them, taking a moment to refocus on what mattered. Placing a steady hand against the wooden frame of her canvas, she reminded herself why she was there. This wasn't merely an exhibition. It was a confrontation, both of her own fears and those inherent in the act of creation. The brush strokes, once the mere expressions of chaos, had become a map of her emotional landscape, a vivid testament to her journey of self-acceptance. When finally, the instructor announced that Ruth would present her piece, her heart galloped. Taking center stage, she faced the eager audience, the warmth of the lights illuminating her resolve. Words began to flow, cautious yet fervent. She spoke of the blurred faces on her canvas, the people who had impacted her life, but remained elusive. Each connection made her more aware of her emotional palette. As she painted through her experiences, she uncovered the interwoven tapestry of her joys and sorrows. With each line she delivered, Ruth could feel the heaviness lift. Fear morphed into an electrifying energy that coursed through her veins. She spoke of vulnerability as strength, revealing how the blurred faces were a metaphor for her own introspection. Sharing her insecurities felt like unclenching a fist, exhaling a long-held breath, and she discovered that the hesitation that once bound her now felt more like a bridge toward her classmates. As she ended, a silence cloaked the room, an electric pause heavy with contemplation. Would they understand? Despite the fear gnawing at her edges, a wave of hope surged within. Ruth's heart basked in the warmth of connection as one of her classmates raised a hand. Your work resonates. It's chaotic and beautiful like life itself. The floodgates opened. Others spoke, sharing their own stories of doubt and fear. Ruth sat back, listening, recognizing their reflections in her own struggles. In this diverse tapestry of voices, she unearthed a crucial realization. The path to understanding herself was not solely a solitary venture. There was a shared experience in their vulnerabilities, an unspoken kinship born of honesty. Leaving the class that day, Ruth was transformed. She had stepped out of her cocoon, exposed yet empowered. Her art was an embodiment of her journey, but so too were these new connections. Each stride away from the classroom felt lighter, as if she were shedding layers of doubt along the way. But as she walked toward the exit, another question stirred her thoughts, sharper than before. Now that she had confronted her past, how would she channel this newfound acceptance into her future? The answers felt tantalizingly close, yet still just out of reach. Ruth paused at the door and took a breath, ready to embrace the next step of her journey, a heady mix of excitement and uncertainty swirling within her. The true test awaited. How would she mold tomorrow from the courage forged today? The first rays of sunlight filtered through Ruth's window the following morning, casting gentle hues across her studio space. Each brushstroke of color on her canvas seemed to shimmer with possibilities, igniting her desire to explore new dimensions in her artwork. Yet, the question that had lingered since yesterday nagged at her. How could she infuse this acceptance into her artistic practice? As her mind wrestled with the uncertainty of the future, she quickly sketched an outline in her notebook. The soft sound of pencil against paper brought clarity, transforming jumbled thoughts into tangible ideas. She could explore the theme of self-acceptance further, creating a series of pieces that channeled this understanding into visual dialogue. What would it look like to represent resilience through color and shape? Could she depict the delicate balance of vulnerability and strength in a way that would draw in her audience? In the midst of this intellectual tempest, Ruth's resolve began to crystallize. She decided to reach out to her classmates to form a small critique group, a place where they could share and enhance their work together. One voice had taken root in her mind, that of the student who had commented on her presentation, praising the blend of chaos and beauty. Their validation opened a door she hadn't even realized was closed. The thought of inviting others into her creative process both excited and terrified her. What if they scrutinized her work? What if they rejected her evolving ideas? Yet, on the other hand, a collaboration could also cultivate her growth and deepen her artistic voice. She resolved to act despite the whispers of doubt. This was part of the journey she had embraced. Ruth grabbed her phone, her pulse quickening as she composed a message to the group. It was simple. Hey everyone, I'd love to create a critique group where we can share our experiences and support each other's artistic journeys. Who's in? Hitting send felt like hurling herself into the deep end of the pool. The uncertainty of responses loomed large. Would they be receptive, or would the screen remain eerily silent? Time trickled on, urging her into action. While waiting for responses, Ruth shifted her focus to her latest canvas. Vibrant colors smeared across its surface. She returned to the blurred faces, envisioning the series with the urgency of a painter ablaze with inspiration. Each outline transformed into a unique piece, telling intricate stories woven from both shadows and light. She honed her technique, layering paint with newfound fervor, as the emotions from her recent revelations breathed life into her creations. Eventually, notifications pinged on her phone, rupturing her concentrated solitude. A wave of exhilaration washed over her as she read enthusiastic replies from classmates. "I'd love to join. Count me in. This is a great idea. Let us make a plan." With each response, Ruth felt that bridge she created yesterday with her peers strengthening. A sense of collaboration ignited within her, a collective energy, sparking discoveries yet untold. The anticipation of exchanging ideas filled her with a rush of hope. But as the day unfolded and plans solidified, Ruth couldn't shake the nagging thought of her relationship with one classmate, Jake. There was something almost magnetic about their interactions, a shared intensity marred only by lingering tension. Could this venture into deeper collaboration also bring challenges she wasn't prepared to face? The blend of excitement and trepidation consumed her thoughts as she stepped back to survey her evolving masterpiece. Would her newfound artistic identity hold up under scrutiny? One thing was certain. Her next session would not be merely a gathering of critiques, but a confrontation with everything she had come to understand about vulnerability and trust. With each passing moment, Ruth realized that the journey she embraced was not just about creation, but about navigating the complex intersection between self-acceptance and vulnerability within both her art and her relationships. As she concluded her day, a different question loomed. How would she face the uncharted emotions waiting to surface with her peers? The anticipation crackled in the air, leaving her eager for what lay ahead. A new chapter was dawning, but along with it, the certainty that the path forward was fraught with both challenges and revelations. Ruth woke the next morning with an uneasy mixture of anticipation and anxiety swirling around her. Today was the day. Members of her critique group were arriving in just a few hours, and she grappled with the weight of that reality. The thrill of collaboration was overshadowed by the nagging fear of exposing her creative vulnerabilities. How deeply could she share without feeling exposed? She paced her studio, the walls covered with her recent pieces, each one a fragment of her journey into self-acceptance. The abstraction of colors and forms, meant to blend chaos and beauty, suddenly felt more like a mirror reflecting her insecurities than a vibrant exploration of strength. Had she misunderstood her art? Would her peers see a reflection of resilience or simply weakness? With a sigh, she sank into her chair, staring at the canvas that had come to symbolize her turmoil. "It's just a first step," she muttered to herself. "These are first drafts of emotions." The internal dialogue propelled her toward her notebook, where she began jotting down thoughts. What does failure look like? What do I want from this? The act felt cathartic, as if with each stroke of the pen, she could demystify her fears. AS response texts pinged in her phone. She felt her pulse quicken. The small group was showing up, eager and ready to engage. A part of her longed for the discussion, to sift through ideas and critiques, while another part wanted nothing more than to retreat into the safety of solitude. Ruth clutched her notebook while contemplating how much she was willing to reveal. Striking the right balance between honesty and defensiveness would be key. When the group trickled into her space later that morning, Ruth's heart raced at the sight of Jake. His enthusiasm was palpable, a striking contrast to her inner trepidation. He greeted her with an easy smile, and for a moment, the tension that hung between them lessened, replaced by an exciting energy. They gathered around her work, and as the critiques flowed, Ruth found herself surprisingly engaged. One by one, her classmates offered insights and feedback, unraveling the layers of her pieces with an admirable intellect. "This piece shows a real struggle," one remarked. "You can see the tension between darkness and hope." The comments struck a chord. She had indeed captured a multifaceted experience, even if imperfectly. As discussions progressed, Ruth decided to take a leap. She shared her thoughts about self-acceptance and vulnerability behind her art. "I want to show strength alongside uncertainty," she confessed, catching Jake's eye as she spoke. "But sharing this feels scary." "Art is terrifying," he replied, his gaze steady, burning away her fears momentarily. "But that's where the magic happens when we let our guard down." His words wrapped around her, a bittersweet reminder of the complexity of vulnerability and its influence in both art and relationships. With the session unfolding, Ruth felt an evolution taking place within herself. Each critique helped her dissect not only her work, but also her psyche, her understanding of fear, vulnerability, and acceptance started blossoming with each conversation. Clarity emerged that art, like life, was an imperfect dance that thrived in authenticity. However, a lingering undercurrent of tension persisted, especially with Jake. Whenever their eyes met, an electric pulse sparked, mixing encouragement with uncertainty. The realization that this dynamic might complicate in her creative process weighed on Ruth. She had uncovered a deeper purpose behind her work. It wasn't merely an exploration. It was a bridge to traverse the complex terrains of connection and vulnerability. As her classmates left, excitement buzzed in the air, but with it came a new question: how would she navigate her evolving relationship with Jake amidst the challenge of artistic honesty? In that moment, Ruth knew she stood at the cusp of not just artistic growth, but a profound personal journey fraught with the intensity that accompanies deepening relationships and self-discovery. Would she embrace the complexity of her emotions and allow them to guide her art, both with her canvas and with Jake? The uncertainty loomed, urging her forward with the promise of new revelations ahead. Ruth emerged from the gathering with a mind buzzing with feedback, yet a knot of uncertainty tightened in her stomach. Every word spoken by her critique group lingered like an echo in her thoughts. As the last well-wisher left, she stood alone amidst her chaotic creations, feeling both exhilarated and disoriented. She had shared pieces of herself, but Jake's steady gaze sparked both inspiration and confusion. She wandered back to the canvas that had haunted her all morning, the one laced with contradictions of struggle and hope. What if they were right? She whispered as she traced the surface with her fingers, feeling the texture's ridges and valleys. Could her art truly encapsulate more than she realized? Perhaps it could echo her own journey of becoming an evolution not merely about colors, but about the vibrant complexities of her emotions. Sitting back down, she immersed herself in her notebook again. The pages filled with fragments of dialogue, her thoughts weaving back and forth. How do I separate personal from professional? She questioned aloud. The duality of her ambitions loomed large. Art as a heartfelt expression versus art as a craft under scrutiny. In her quest for honesty, had she unwittingly blurred those lines? As dusk settled outside her studio, shadows crept across her work. Instead of feeling subdued, the encroachment ignited a determination. She recalled Jake's words about letting her guard down. What if vulnerability was not a weakness, but a catalyst? What if the fears she fought to suppress were the very essence that could propel her art to new heights? With renewed vigor, Ruth embraced the challenge of pushing deeper into her work. She gathered her brushes and freshly squeezed paint, contemplating how her artistic style could evolve to mirror her expanding emotional landscape. Each brushstroke could become a declaration of authenticity, a bold step into uncharted territory that reflected both her personal struggles and burgeoning self-awareness. Adding flecks of gold to a previously dark piece, she guided her brush with a deliberate force. The shimmer took on a life of its own, illuminating textures that mirrored the dichotomy she was grappling with. Visibly, her art began to transform from mere representations of turmoil to manifestations of resilience. Yet in the midst of this self-discovery, the tension regarding Jake remained. Their conversations were tinged with unsaid words, and every exchange teased the delicate balance between creative camaraderie and deeper personal connection. Should she confront this unresolved tension, or would it jeopardize the progress she was making artistically? With each stroke of the brush, she replayed their last discussion, questioning her instincts. The glances shared during critiques were charged with meaning. Was he simply a peer, or was there something lurking beneath that veneer? Ruth stepped back from her canvas, the flickering light creating shadows that danced around her. She realized her relationship with Jake could not be ignored. To grow as an artist, she needed to navigate these intertwined emotions without losing herself. This dedication to her artistic growth required commitment not just to her pieces, but also to the realization that she could explore her relationship with Jake in tandem with her creative evolution. A new resolve washed over her. The next critique session would not only be about her art, but also about confronting the complexity of her feelings. Head-on.as, she prepared to clean her brushes. A new thought struck her: what if this intertwining of emotions and creativity was the very essence of her next piece? How could she channel the uncertainty and excitement of evolving relationships into her work? Would she have the courage to bring this layered experience into the light? In that moment of self-realization, Ruth understood that the upcoming critique session would be a proving ground not just for her art, but for her personal growth and her ability to unveil hidden truths. The stakes had never felt higher, urging her forward into the uncharted territory of self-discovery and emotional honesty. But as the questions swirled within, one resounding thought emerged. Could she truly embrace vulnerability, not only in art, but in her relationship with Jake? The answer began to feel tantalizingly close, yet still unsettlingly out of reach. The journey ahead was fraught with challenges, and Ruth realized it was time to confront the heart of her artistic and personal ambitions. Would she possess the courage to take that leap into the unknown? A month had passed since Ruth stood before her peers and unveiled her art, a visceral portrayal of her journey, filled with layers of meaning. Each piece she created, a unique expression of resilience and vulnerability, evoked questions she had barely begun to understand. Yet on this new morning, as she woke to the soft glow of dawn spilling through her windows, a sense of assurance coursed through her veins. The critiques had not merely fostered her artistic growth, they had forged connections, and those connections were evolving. Jake's smile during their last session, his thoughtful reflections, and the way their gazes lingered had awakened something profound within her, a stirring realization that vulnerability extended beyond paint on canvas. It could permeate her friendships and hint at something deeper. Today, with a bit of apprehension, Ruth planned to meet Jake after class. They would discuss their collaborative project, weaving together their contrasting styles into a shared narrative. As she prepared, Ruth reflected on her progression. She had conquered her initial trepidations about stepping into the art world, selecting vibrant palettes that echoed the complexities of her experiences. No longer lost in her past, she had channeled uncertainties and fears into artworks that resonated with both beauty and chaos. The journey had transformed both her outlook on aging and her perception of creative expression. Confronting herself through art had undoubtedly fostered growth. She was no longer simply a spectator in life, but an active creator. Arriving at the studio, the air was charged with anticipation. She noticed the way other artists interwove their discussions with excitement, laughter, and camaraderie. Amongst them, Ruth felt the weight of her evolving identity as an artist. She had gained recognition not just as a participant, but as an influential voice. Her friends greeted her warmly, but it was Jake's presence that ignited deeper emotions within her. They exchanged smiles, a silent acknowledgement of the uncharted territories soon to be explored. As they gathered supplies to begin collaborative sketches, she felt the familiar flutter in her chest, a mix of excitement and anxiety. Breaking the silence between them, she steeled herself, recalling that morning's revelations. "I've been thinking about vulnerability," she started, her voice steady. "I believe it's the bridge between our art and our lives." Jake, intrigued, met her gaze. "Absolutely. It's what makes our stories resonant." He leaned in, a spark igniting as they delved into their shared thoughts. Their dialogue flowed, weaving their fears and aspirations into tangible goals for their project. They decided to create a mixed-media piece that explored the edges of ambition and vulnerability. By combining their unique techniques, they could present a narrative that seamlessly blended chaos with delicate strength. With hours spent sketching and laughing, the initial hesitation dissolved, replaced by a creative electricity. As the project unfurled before them, Ruth felt an expansion in her heart. This was an examination of connection, not only through art, but through shared hope. Here, she wasn't just showcasing her emotions, she was inviting Jake into her narrative, acknowledging their mutual journey. When the day of the exhibition arrived, Ruth found herself standing amidst a vibrant crowd of fellow creators, anticipation humming in the air. The emergence of their collaborative piece felt alive, pulsating with energy. As people began to engage with their art, Ruth realized she was standing on the precipice of an exhilarating transformation, uniquely empowered by the connections she had formed. Suddenly, Jake turned toward her, a grin marking his face. "Ready for this?" Ruth inhaled deeply, a smile breaking across her lips. Absolutely. Her heart raced with pride, not just for her art, but for the friendships forged along the way. the courage to embrace risk, and the newfound strength in vulnerability. Their piece, an intertwining of colors and textures, beckoned viewers. Each story lingering, each connection understood. With every compliment, she felt a solid confidence rising within her. She had set out to reclaim her vision and voice, and in the embrace of creation, she had conquered far more than graphic details on a canvas. She had reshaped the narrative of her life. Ruth no longer felt lost to time. She was forging a path illuminated by creative passion, accompanied by a burgeoning connection with Jake, a history etched in brushstrokes that spoke of growth and acceptance. As the event came to a close, Ruth left the venue enveloped in warmth. Outside, she paused, taking a moment to breathe in the crisp night air, filled with echoes of laughter and camaraderie. She was not only an artist now, but a storyteller, a participant in life's vivid tapestry etched not in solitude, but in collective growth. The journey she had embarked upon had cultivated authentic fulfillment, and the shimmering possibilities of her next chapter awaited. You need to subscribe now to witness more of Ruth's powerful journey and uncover the profound stories of transformation. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm and keep our community thriving. We want to hear from you, so comment your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this emotional journey. Don't wait even one more second to share this incredible story with at least 5 friends who need inspiration in their own lives.